Contarte Historias presents Sherlock, Lupin and Me. The Dark Lady by Irene Adler. Illustrations inspired by the work of Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. Chapter 5. Shipwreck. Sherlock. Sherlock. I shouted the next day in front of the windows of the Holmes house. The garden was precisely arranged. The door was locked. The shutters, closed too. Not a fly flew. Would there be no one? "Are you home, Sherlock?" I tried one last time. I heard the hustle and bustle inside, a chair moved, a glass object falling to the floor, a stifled imprecation, and then a shutter on the second floor slammed open. In the dark square of the window appeared the robust face of a 20-year-old with slicked-back hair, open eyes, and a rather absent gaze. "Is it market day, miss?" He apostrophized me rudely. "What does it bring us? Ripe melons? Vegetables? A net of churlas? Tell me, please." I took a step back, furious. Not because I thought I was one of those villagers who went from house to house selling fresh fish or vegetables, but because the boy at the window was talking to me without even looking at me. "I think you make a mistake, my lord," I froze him with a justly affected reply. And I was pleased to see him startled. "I am a friend of Mr. William Sherlock Holmes." "Are you at home?" "A friend?" The boy blurted out. "Now that's good. William!" he shouted, turning into the house. "William, run!" Visibly suffocated, Sherlock appeared in the doorway. "William!" the other went on. "William! Can you tell what you've gotten yourself into?" "Here I am," my friend said, looking first at me and then at the guy at the window. He held up a hand. "It's all right. You can go back to your reading. We're going to go for a spin." Watching them talk, I sensed that the one in the window must be Sherlock's older brother. "Won't you introduce me to your friend?" she asked. "Maybe another time. See you later." Sherlock came running to the gate, gave me a pleading look, and pointed to the street leading down to the harbor. "No, better not." He changed his mind quickly. "Let's go this way." I left the usual 3 steps and remained silent, and then, as soon as I turned the corner, at the first vine-covered pergola, I stood in the middle of the street and pretended to be angry. "Nice to see you, Sherlock." He raised his arms to the sky, as if she had threatened him with a rifle. "Oh, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" he shouted. "I am sorry. I didn't want you to meet." He. Your brother?" "Yes." "No. We don't get along at all." "It's so. He's handsome." Sherlock dropped his arms suddenly. "How?" I said he's handsome. "How old are you?" 20. 21, he muttered. "And what does he do?" "Bah, nothing. Absolutely nothing," he exclaimed, blushing. "He's the laziest and least ambitious person I know. He's incapable of doing anything." "Everything was wrong with you, then." "What do you mean?" "That if being lazy and unambitious makes you so angry, it means you're different. Or that you have a keen sense of practicality." "I don't know." "Certainly more than him." He resumed his march with his inimitable strides, taking it for granted that I was following him. On the other hand, I did not move an inch. I remained in the shade of the wisteria pergola, at the exact point where I had stopped a short time before. It took him a long time to realize that he was walking alone. He jumped in embarrassment and turned to see what was the matter. He raised his eyebrows questioningly and asked, What's going on? First lesson in practicality, my good Sherlock. When we meet, I'd appreciate it if you would greet me, just a hello, Irene. He snorted.
Ah.
What's more? And you can smile at me, too. Sherlock faced me again, his cheeks were red. I don't know if he wanted to laugh, because he was angry, or because he was ashamed of something. Can you tell what all this clowning is? Because I was furious, I realized. I put on a honeyed, calm voice. It's called education, Sherlock. I haven't come to your house to meet your brother. We had met, hadn't we? Well, here I am. I've been punished all night and didn't eat dinner. I'd love to have a bite to eat, but I have the impression that the city is on the other side, in the opposite direction. I smiled. Do you want to tell me where we're going, or do I just have to follow you? It was a lot of sentences put together, with questions and jabs one after the other. Sherlock opened his mouth, not knowing where to start. It was obvious that he needed a hand. He wasn't used to chatting too much with friends. Start by apologizing, I said to him, and then I'll help you. In a shop I exchanged my 20 silver francs for so much bread, so many sardines, and so much spicy mustard that I had the impression that mine was the first silver coin they had ever seen. Outside the tent, I broke a piece of bread, spread it in mustard, and ate it voraciously, with the result that my throat was scorching for the rest of the day. We walked along the coast, as the day before, and then took an inland path, a clay track that meandered parallel to the sea, under a wide canopy of lush vegetation. Where are we going? I asked, though I already knew the answer. To the Ashcroft house. Lupin must be there by now. It took us almost half an hour to get to the old ruined house, and the last part of the journey was the most difficult. The clay road continued past the house and into a distant forest, and we had to cross an uncultivated meadow of sunburnt grass. And a lot of thorns. As Sherlock had predicted, Lupin was already there. Surely he had heard us arrive much earlier, at least since I had started to jump on one foot and the other trying not to prick myself with the brambles, but he still turned his back on us and looked at the sea in front of him. Welcome, he exclaimed without turning. Lupin, Sherlock said, leaping onto one of the rocks strewn along the beach. Then, on the sand, he stood, undecided whether to turn to help me down or let me do it on my own, as if I were a boy. One of them, and not a little girl with pale legs full of scratches, who demanded smiles and good manners. He opted for an in-between attitude. He moved away from the boulder, but stayed nearby just in case he needed his help. I jumped into the arena without thinking. Irene! Lupin exclaimed, turning suddenly to me. Yelled. Lupin had a bloody scar across his forehead and a hideous grimace, with protruding teeth. He turned to Sherlock and raised his hands. I'm dead. I looked at Lupin's hideous face and the rapid change of expression on his friend's face. Indecisive terror, perplexity, and, at the end, laughter. And I realized that maybe it was better to stop yelling. I noticed for the first time that at Lupin's feet was a strange little leather suitcase. And that my new friend didn't seem to suffer much from his death. How is it? Lupin asked, looking first at Sherlock and then at me. Fabulous, Sherlock said. It looks like the real deal. I wanted to brush against Lupin's scar, but he jumped away. Oh, no. Do not touch. Sherlock folded his arms over his chest. Wow. I didn't understand what had happened to you. Lupin pretended to stagger, laughed again, and made the same hellish grin she'd seen him a short time before. And the teeth? Aren't they perfect? You've bitten, huh? He put a finger in his mouth, inflated and deflated his cheeks, and with a thud removed his dentures. Et voila, he said. Would you mind explaining to me what this is all about? I asked as I slowly regained my composure. Sherlock and Lupin sat cross-legged on the sand next to the leather suitcase. Lupin half closed it to show me the brass badge on the lid. Haven't I told you what my father does for a living? He's an acrobat, a tightrope walker. He opened the suitcase again. And this is her costume suitcase. I approached with a swagger, almost suspiciously. In the suitcase were masks, wigs, bizarre dentures, fake noses, paintbrushes and jars of glue. A veritable arsenal of fake mustaches and beards, pigtails, powders and lipsticks. And can we use them? I asked, fascinated. I dropped me bag of bread, mustard, and herring on the floor. Not at all, Lupin answered, picking up a long black wig with real hair. We spent the whole afternoon dressing up and impersonating the heroes and heroines of the few passages of plays we knew by heart. Sherlock proved to be a born actor. He would completely change his face with just a few strokes of a brush and a pair of mustaches, and his voice would transform according to his appearance. It could be, indifferently, King Lear or Henri V, the Jew Shylock or a Sicilian soldier. Lupin was more graceful in his movements and that, by contrast, made him perfect for playing wild roles. It moved with momentum, in a way that was both dramatic and harmonious. With the wig and white color around his eyes, he could look like a monkey, with a handkerchief across his head, perfectly round. He was a pirate, the beard made him a castaway, the clay dust and glitter the prince of the desert. As for me, I felt so comfortable with stage makeup, fake jewelry, and wigs, that at one point I started singing. I sang because I was playing a part in my head, but I really sang, with my voice, as if I were in a performance of Rigoletto or La Traviata. Sherlock and Lupin were in the scene with me, Lupin lying on the floor with Sherlock condemning him to death with a wooden sword, but when I started singing they suddenly stopped playing. I noticed, but I finished the aria I had started. When it was over, there was silence on the beach, broken only by the lapping of the waves. "Do it again," Sherlock said quietly. "Do what, excuse me?" I asked. "You're right," Lupin said. "Do it again, sing." I blushed. Absolutely, without being able to remedy it. I took off my wig and stammered. "No, guys, Do it again," Sherlock repeated, leaning on the wooden sword. He looked at me with an almost hurtful intensity, as if he were commanding me. I wanted to wring out the bundle. I wouldn't even know what to sing. "No. You have a beautiful voice," Lupin said. Sherlock couldn't take his eyes off me. "Leave it alone, you kids, you're embarrassing me." He understood. He realized that I wasn't joking, and that I was uneasy to be looked at that way. So he shook his head and broke the strange atmosphere that had been created on that beach. I helped Lupin get up, and then we started playing again and putting on the costumes, but it wasn't the same. We served ourselves bread and herring. Lupin cleaned them with a fascinating little knife with a very sharp blade, made, he told us, by a friend of his father's. She never left his side. His father's friend, after a few years, founded the famous cutlery shop Opinel and made a fortune that continues today. We let the afternoon die, and when the sun began to gild the horizon, we started back home. We decided to go to the beach, barefoot. The seagulls jumped in front of us, annoyed, and the waves were long and regular. "Have you had singing lessons?" Lupin asked me after a while. "They tried to give them to me, yes," I admitted, looking out to sea. I knew how to sing since I was very young, but I liked keeping it a secret. It was a satisfaction that I had a hard time sharing with others. "But I don't think the tiresome singing teachers are made for me," I added. It was true. I hated the classes my mother had forced me to take. All those affected teachers, with their handkerchiefs sticking out of their black jacket pockets, their fingers loose on the piano, repeating for hours do. C major. C major, trying to get him to make unnatural gurgles. Well, you're wrong, Lupin went on. I've never heard anyone sing like that. Come on. I replied. It's true. You tell him, William. Sherlock, as always, walked a few steps ahead of us. He raised a hand and said, You can tell you're undisciplined. What? Undisciplined? I replied. He looked over his shoulder at me. We had almost reached the city. The two islets could be seen in front of the promontory, crowned by seagulls. If you weren't undisciplined, why would you hate something useful like singing lessons? I hate them because they're terribly boring. I replied. Precisely. That's what I said. Look who came to speak. Sherlock stopped then. He sought Lupin's complicity and obtained it without any effort. What a character. If we congratulate you because you sing well, you ask us to shut up. And conversely, if we tell you that you sing regularly because you don't take lessons, you get angry. Lupin laughed, but I didn't. As Sherlock spoke, he had seen something behind him, behind a ridge of rocks that hid the small strip of sand in a cove. It looked like a thick bundle that the sea had brought to shore. The screech of a seagull gave me goosebumps, and I realized that I hadn't heard a word of what Sherlock and Lupin were telling me. I'm sorry, I murmured, leaning first on Lupin's shoulder and then grabbing Sherlock's arm. I pointed to that strange lump on the shore. What is that? They both turned their heads. In front of us, the beach bristled with rocks that led to the promontory. Then you could see the wall of the old quarter, the towers and bell towers of the city, and long flattened clouds disappearing inwards. By 1,000 bolts of lightning, Sherlock murmured, suddenly stiffening. Mon Dieu! Lupin exclaimed as he ran along the beach. He was a castaway. What did you think of this Sherlock, Lupin and Irene Adler audiobook? Did you like the ending? Who was your favorite character? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to not miss the next chapter. The mystery continues.